Okay. So just to let everybody know that this is recorded. Hi, Julie. Nice to see
Hi.
you.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a bit late.
Do not worry at all. You're very welcome. I know what it's like. We're all rushing around. So we're recording this session just so you're aware, so that we can share this information with others who aren't able to make it at this time today. And we want to welcome you. I would really like this to be an interactive session. Um, because social media and use of phones and screens is something that we all have a personal relationship with. And it's not really so much of a one size fits all. And so I'm really happy as we go through to take questions, to take comments, to listen to people's experiences so we can actually use people's experiences in order to help us think about this topic. So please do ask questions, stick up your hand if you want to, turn your camera on if you want to ask questions, but you don't have to, and make comments. Okay, so we're here to talk about navigating the social media era. And we know that that has been a growing area of discussion and a growing infringement on our personal day-to-day experiences for a number of years. And yet, in many ways, social media, the internet, AI, online presence is incredibly helpful to our day-to-day life. Um, I use ChatGPT as much as the next person my age, which that is to be said, nowhere near as much as the average 19-year-old. But I don't want this to be a throw, let's kind of scrutinize and be critical of everything, when actually we really do want to take the best of what is on offer online and in social media, but also be very careful about what we're using it for and thinking about our own mental health. So we can go through this. Thank you, Renee. Um, So we've always known and said out loud that when we give children access to the whole world in their pocket through a phone or device, we give the whole world access to our children. And yet we don't think very much about that for ourselves. We use phones, probably checking them upwards of 750 times a day. And everything we do, pretty much, when it comes to social media or online presence, is being tracked by somebody. And that data is being used to hone information to make it more palatable for you as an individual. In some ways, that's helpful. And in some ways, it really isn't. Okay, so we want to be really aware that when we are using the device that's in our pocket, we are giving big tech and data companies access to our own intellectual property. Okay, next slide, please. So, just so you're aware, there is a growing international context of doing something differently governmentally for young people, where countries are banning social media for under 16-year-olds. The UK is actually now looking at whether they're going to do that, with a high likelihood that ultimately they will. I think in general, this is going to have a domino effect. And internationally, we will see governments taking action to protect children's brains, essentially, because now the research that's coming out is irrefutable about the impact that social media and devices have on uh, the young brain and its physical and emotional development, which is huge. Okay, so next slide, Renee. I know you're trying to go on to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's
That's
not
okay, don't
popping up.
worry.
Okay, there we go. There you go.
There we are. So when we think about its impact on us, on our development or our everyday um, functioning, we need to think about social media's impact and phone and iPad impact on things like our brain development. So it impacts massively the prefrontal cortex development, which in young people, because it doesn't develop till we're 25, can actually be lighter in brain matter the more a young person uses their phone screen and social media. So we need to be really aware of that. It has a behavioral impact on all of us, not just the content, which is so skewed to our own opinions. It doesn't offer anything but our own opinions mirrored back to us, which is a huge problem. So that impacts our behavior and our ongoing opinion development. But it also really impacts things like attention and concentration and our behavior that is linked to that. So I was talking to somebody yesterday who likes to go on TikTok and is an adult, and they were saying to me that if they go on TikTok for any length of time, they can't hope to refocus on the work that they're supposed to be doing in the office because of the very fast-paced nature of um, things like TikTok and short videos on YouTube. It really impacts our ability to focus and concentrate immediately afterwards, as well as in the long term. And so what we get is kind of a fake ADHD kind of response. It's one of the reasons why there's so much more ADHD in young people now in general. But with us as adults, whilst it doesn't create ADHD, it does actually exacerbate any symptoms that we have and makes it harder for us to focus and attend. Of course, we also know there's massive amounts of exploitation, not only for young people, but for adults as well, some of whom really do become scammed. And something that we really need to be aware of as parents, as well as for ourselves, is that these devices and the content on social media is developed to be as addictive as possible. So the research has shown that the addiction is akin to going to kind of a slot machine gambling center. Um, and so, of course, we don't live in those. We don't stay in slot machine gambling centers 24/7 or 18 hours a day, but we do have something as addictive in our pocket. And it's one of the really big issues. And a lot of kind of young adults talk to me about not being able to come off their phones despite wanting to. And so it becomes an addiction issue. We've talked about concentration. We know that it reduces academic performance by between 5 and 10% in young people. But of course, for us as adults, we need to understand that screens and phones and social media content in particular really does impact our mental health. One of the really big problems with it is that we we see people having what looks like an incredibly privileged life, or we get to see the very best moments of their life and they look so polished that that's all it looks like they have in their life is kind of perfection. Of course, when we engage our wise minds as human beings, we do know that that's not possible. But in the moment, what it does is that kind of content reaches into us as human beings to our deepest shame generally being related to I'm not good enough. And it pokes that spot within the shame of us, several times a day. So the platform I use mostly is LinkedIn. And I have a lot of engagement on LinkedIn with other psychologists globally. And I, of course, see what they're doing. And if I'm not careful, I'm seeing people write research papers or develop new therapies that are becoming kind of globally recognized. It can make me think I'm not good enough as a psychologist. Now, being a psychologist, I can understand that that's what I'm seeing. and it doesn't make me not good enough, but it takes work. And a lot of young adults and adults in general don't have the psychological mechanisms to use to protect themselves from that. And I'm sure my friend Julie here would agree, as a psychologist, that even when you have the tools, it can still be incredibly difficult. Yes, she's nodding her head. So we have to be very careful of the shame and the not good enough response that we have to social media content, and really work to understand that that is not really anybody's reality, that everybody's reality, no matter how good it looks, is full of light and shade. But that takes ongoing work. And of course, we get unwanted content, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a short while. Okay, thanks, Rennie. So, as I was saying, in terms of addiction, tech companies make the apps as addictive as possible. There are reams of incredibly intelligent people who aren't thinking about how we are as human beings on a day-to-day basis, but just thinking about keeping us on their apps for as long as possible. Because the more time we spend, the more data they harvest. So we as individuals are being harvested for our brain data, for our interests, the more money they make. So they are really just using us to make money, and they're kidding us into thinking that they care about us when they don't. They're levering dopamine circuits, which are triggering brain responses similar to those, as I said, that we get when we're using slot machines. Most of us show signs of behavioral addiction to smartphones. And at least 2/3 of us as adults have said we've tried to cut down at some point or other on our phone use and are struggling. And 1 in 5 adults have wanted help to cut down. It's
Shan,
something that I spend quite a lot of time talking to young adults about in sessions that I do, because often, especially when they have trauma, and if anybody's seen the research we've done here in the ACEs data, what we know is there's a huge amount of trauma on this island, and people use it in order to manage a trauma response. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, thanks,
Chantal,
Renee.
before
Yeah,
we go on to the next
please.
one, there's a question in the chat. You want to take that
Oh,
now or you
yes.
want to take that later?
Let's take it now.
Okay.
Brilliant.
So, one of our participants, Angela, said, "Are you seeing an increase in people having anxiety about talking on the phone since they are more comfortable using social media or Messenger to communicate? How would what would be your advice to such persons?"
I think, yes, there is absolutely a an increase in anxiety. Um, for in general, Angela, and also for people talking on the phone. Many people now don't talk on the phone so much, find it really hard to manage conversations in real time, and much prefer message or email conversations. Um, and so there's a couple of ways to think about this. We can think about it that actually we have all of these different ways of communicating now. And so there are times when maybe we don't need to talk on the phone. So when I'm going to talk about my own experience for a moment. Video conversations and messaging have been really helpful for me. I'm partially deaf. I'm deaf in one ear, and I wear a bone anchored hearing aid to try and help me with that. But unless I can lip read, the burden on my brain to hear people is incredibly difficult. And so I'm somebody who's always avoided just straight phone calls as much as I could in my life. So now I will try and do video calls as much as possible. But of course, some people are avoiding that even because we have the messaging. So, what I would say is if it's something that you need to use in your life, that we would tend to use a systematic desensitization approach, which basically means to expose yourself to trying it in situations that are less risky, and then use that to kind of calm your brain's anxiety response. So, for example, if you need to um, practice a conversation, you might call a helpline, or you might call somebody who is very low anxiety for us, like a friend or a really good colleague, to have a practice conversation and let them into that. Let them know that you are struggling with phone conversations and say, can I please practice that with you? I need to have this conversation with somebody and I want to see how it goes. So role playing can be really helpful. But also, there are many times when we don't need to use phone calls. So it's about balance, I would say, Angela.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's
That'll
helpful.
work. You got to set the stop for me, please.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, is somebody asking a
Wait,
question about that?
Mhm.
Cassie Rain, do you have a question? I think your mic is unmuted. No?
Okay, that's fine. So Angela, I hope that that's helpful for you. Please let me know if you have any follow-up questions to that. But I think even just regardless of the content, even just looking at our phones, which increases our cortisol response, creates anxiety when we're doom scrolling. So doom scrolling through videos and content is the worst type of social media and phone use for anxiety. Um, and it's not just the content, it's actually the physical act of scrolling through content, because we've got an anticipatory response of what we're going to see next. It raises our heart rate, it raises our adrenaline. And because it's not always a positively associated response, it raises our cortisol. And so then we have this anxiety response, which, without even worrying about what we're watching, creates anxiety. And then, of course, we have anxiety related to whatever it is we're watching. And our kids are often watching kind of shouty, loud content where families are kind of very, very loud in their play and fun, but in a way that actually makes us have a fear response because of the levels of shoutiness. And that raises cortisol too. So it's really important to understand that and to know that when children come off that, they're likely to have meltdowns. But also, when we come off that, we're much more likely to be grumpy and to find it hard to engage with people and to be more irritable and agitated. So watching for that response in ourselves is really important. Okay, let's move on. Thank you. So on average, we receive more than 200 smartphone notifications a day, sometimes more, but generally one every few minutes. I don't know about you guys, but I've just got a smartwatch. I got it for Christmas, okay? And I thought I need to track my steps. That's why I got it, okay? And it's linked to my phone, which is brilliant. So I know if I have a call coming in. But what really amazed me was just how many totally mundane, unnecessary notifications I was getting on my watch. So it might be like, oh, I don't know, something that I would never normally look at, that's a marketing email pops up on my phone unnecessarily. And so it's very distracting, and it really made me understand just how many notifications we are getting as human beings. I've muted most of them, and I turn off my notifications on social media. But it's massive. It's a huge influx of information to our brains every day. So often when we open our phones for a particular task, like to put in a meeting or to send a message, we get sucked into a rabbit hole that usually has nothing to do with the task we initially intended to complete. And then we will get sucked into the rabbit hole and end up doing something else. And we'll put our phones down, often without completing the task that we had initially set out to complete. And when we finish it and we put our phones down, we then notice that we've forgotten what that initial task was that we were going to complete. That is how effective apps and phones are at distracting us and using our data to make money. So our phones are not helping us to organize our lives. They're creating distractions to the organization of our lives. So whilst we think it's really important, of course, to have a phone and to have our calendar and our emails on there, and we think, isn't that great and isn't it helpful? Actually, all the noise that's created by social media and notifications does not allow us to use those very helpful parts of our phones effectively. So what is this doing to us? It's creating much worse memory functions. I sometimes don't know if my poor memory is because of the menopause, if it's because of being a parent with young children, or if it's because of something like too much phone use. I often have no clue. Okay, but I'm pretty sure all of that is not helping me. It impacts our processing speed, which slows down with social media use, our attention levels, which become much shorter, our language skills, which become dulled, and our executive functioning. Executive functioning is a fancy word for organizational skills. So it really stops our frontal lobes, which does all of our emotional regulation and all of our organization. It stops our frontal lobes from working effectively for us. Okay. So it makes it harder for us to focus on longer tasks or activities. I had to sit down and write a report recently. It ended up being a huge report, but the procrastination I had, probably because of some of this phone use that I have, it made it very, very difficult to start. Once I was started, I was absolutely fine, but it just makes it much harder to get into these big tasks that we sometimes use. I mean, thank goodness for AI, which can help us. But as human beings, we don't just want to rely on AI instead of our own brains. It's not a replacement for our own brain functioning. Okay, it should be an additional bonus. So smartphone use, as Angela kind of asked before and pointed out, smartphone and tablet use is linked to anxiety, depression, and poor sleep. It's really important to understand the heavy link there is to those three things. What it also does, as I was talking about earlier, is cements an external sense of self-worth. Excuse my typing errors there. And that links directly to our shame response, as I was talking about before. So we're seeing other people looking fabulous and doing so well, and that we're not in that same space, we're not doing the same thing, and it links to that I'm not good enough, to that shame. The staged content makes us feel like we're missing out, and therefore our life is somehow less worthwhile than those people we see online, and it creates really high levels of discontent. Okay, and that's really hard to manage. And the younger we are, the more the higher those levels of discontent are. The older we are, the more we kind of have life experience to understand and appreciate what we have. The younger we are, the less we have that. And so it's very, very difficult to come away from that narrative that is built into us from social media. Also, one of the major issues is being on social media, for some people, makes them feel like they're in a car where they can basically say whatever they want without the other person really hearing them or having the consequence of it. And so we get incredibly rude behavior from people that's very opinionated without any regard for other human beings. And that is not okay. It's not okay in real life, and it's not okay on social media. And so we have to really take accountability for ourselves when we're using social media and for what we're saying. Okay, we only have to look at kind of being at the comments on Cayman Mile Road to really think about actually what do people feel that they can say here without any real repercussion in real life, if you like. The other thing that's really important to know is there's been a really big controlled trial. And the first generation to grow up with smartphones were the subjects of that trial, and they're now adults. And the data from that piece of research shows that the younger they got their first smartphone, the worse their mental health is today. My daughters know that they won't get smartphones until they're 15, 16. And whilst my eldest daughter was very upset when I told her that, she's now completely on board with it because she understands what screens and phones are doing to our mental health. Can you just go back a slide, Renee? Jane is asking if we can go back to the being sucked down a rabbit hole slide. Yes, this one. And Jane, what were you saying about that? It's key. Thank you, Jane. You believe that this is key, and seeing it written really helps it to sink in that yes, we get sucked into a rabbit hole. Even that, the act of being sucked into a rabbit hole, and I'm really glad that that resonates, can create shame. So when that's hardest for me is that I'm at the end of a session, okay, in my therapeutic work, and I've done, you know, a large part of the time, really good therapeutic work with people, and I've got a really great relationship with them. Happy days. Okay. And then I go to put in the next session in my diary, and I open my phone and I see my notifications, and I find myself checking something that has nothing to do with my client and nothing to do with scheduling the next session. And then I wake up halfway through doing it. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, I am doing something wholly unrelated to the person I'm trying to help here. And that gives me real shame. So that's when I get really sucked into a rabbit hole in a way that affects me and impacts me. So what I try to do, and I don't always manage this, I often fail, but what I try to do is before I pick my phone up, I take a really deep breath in, shoulders back, and breathe out, and think I am picking up my phone to put in a diary invite. And so that as soon as I open my phone, I click on my Google Calendar app, which is on my first page of my phone, straight on there, and don't look at anything else. But it often still catches me out, and it's a great source of difficulty for me on my phone. Thank you, Jane, for saying that that helps you, and that you know it's a problem for many people around you. And that sometimes it's hard to complete a task you started out trying to complete. So we are being deluded by big tech into thinking that they're making our lives easier. And really what they're doing is making us make their lives easier by selling us products and using our data to make money. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to be harvested like a field of corn. Okay, my brain is not corn. Our brains are incredibly precious. And our data belongs to us, not to them. So one of the things that I have, one of the things that I do, and I have the least addictive personality of anybody I know. Okay. I've never been a massive fan of social media. I've never really been kind of a big doom scroller. There have been moments where I've done that, but it's few and far between. And if I go onto Facebook, I'm maybe on there for 10 minutes and then I'm like, oh, I'm so bored. And I don't like the physical feeling it gives me in my stomach. I can feel the cortisol and it doesn't feel nice. So I might check in with friends. I use WhatsApp and like Messenger way more to keep in touch with friends. And that's what I kind of get sucked into. Oh, and LinkedIn, because I'm on there for my career profile, which is a whole other thing that causes issues. But I like that more because of the content is less kind of social media-y and more about individual people and what they're doing. Okay, so I've forgotten what I was going to say to that, but here's a bit of my experience online related to mental health issues. And this caused me a huge amount of cortisol and it was horrible. So my guilty pleasure is watching divers redirect tiger sharks. I dive. I absolutely love sharks. I've always been a little bit obsessed with sharks since I was a kid. Um, and so I really enjoy watching um, people do this. Okay. They're incredibly majestic creatures. And it reminds me that we really shouldn't be afraid of them. Okay. So I'm having a look on this website and I see this lovely, and I think I'll just have a look at their page. So I click over to their page, and then I see this on the right hand side, and you'll see the two very dark pictures which have nothing to do with diving. Now, that's a kind of an image that was used in a very controversial, kind of unpleasant campaign that led a number of young people to take their lives by suicide in a kind of a very sick game. I don't know if it was outside the UK. I think maybe it was global, but it certainly impacted the UK hugely, which is where I was working at the time that this came out. And so when I saw it, I had this massive rush of adrenaline because I found it really scary. And then I kind of thought, what would have happened if my daughters had been looking at that with me and they had seen that? I am pretty sure, based on what I know about them, that they would have had nightmares. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So I found it really disturbing, and let's move on from it because it's horrible for people to see. But it's so important to think about that we are not in control of the content that we see and that's shown to us and what people are posting. And so we have to be very careful about looking after ourselves when we're on social media. So how do we try and manage this? First of all, let's speak about it in a way that's open and shame-free. So I'm hopefully a good advocate for talking about the things that create shame for us and for myself in a way that shows that actually we can talk about this, and not only can be, what we must talk about this. Okay. Secondly, we have to educate ourselves as adults about how these platforms and algorithms work and what they are truly trying to do rather than what they're pretending to do. We need to understand that what we usually see on our feeds and how we see that is not a reflection of the real world, of our personality, our interests, or our hobbies. It's not a reflection of the diversity of opinions and perspectives that we should be allowed to be exposed to in the world, because what we get is a mirror reflection of our own extreme feelings. And when our feelings are particularly extreme, then that causes huge problems. We only have to look at the geopolitical landscape at the moment to understand what social media can do in terms of right-wing governments coming to the fore. Because social media has definitely been impactful in allowing that to occur across our societies globally. Thirdly, we can start taking small steps to change our online habits. We don't have to do everything at once. We decide which notifications to switch off and which apps to delete, either permanently or for a time. So I don't get any notifications from Facebook or from Instagram at all. And I don't get notifications from LinkedIn, but I will go onto LinkedIn to check what's going on my feed. But that helps me not get sucked into those particular rabbit holes when I'm opening up my phone. You can also, on your computer, turn off all the news feeds that are showing you the kind of gossip and political information each time you open up your computer, if it's anything like mine. So I've switched that off so I don't get it anymore. Was it, Rennie, was it you who said that you had done that and I'd taken inspiration from you?
Yeah, you and I met
Yeah,
about 2 weeks ago, and I
that's
didn't
right.
realize how much I was getting sucked into those stories. And when I shut it off, it was like a complete feeling to my brain, and I was just way more productive and happier, actually. So yeah,
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And so you gave me inspiration to do that on my computer, and that has massively helped me.
thank you.
You're welcome. So, so we get to decide, and taking small steps and feeling the benefit of it is a good way to start, rather than going cold turkey, which actually often just leads to coming back on. Hi, Juliana, do you have a question?
No, sorry, I don't. Sorry, I'll go back on mute.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry. Nice to see you. And then fourthly, we can think about our phone use behavior and how that impacts and role models to our children, for example. We need to move away from self-blame and think about how the algorithms are exploiting us. Okay, this is not a blame game and it should not be a shame game. Okay, it's understanding what big tech does. And they spend trillions on making everything addictive for us. So we are, you know, unless we're educated about it, we're powerless against that dinosaur of a industry. So we really need to move away from shame and into educating ourselves to understand what we need to do so that our shame doesn't just keep us hidden. If we just feel shame, we hide. But if we take an understanding and learning opportunity, actually it allows us to take accountability. And that's what we want to move into. Okay, so we can develop screen time and phone use agreements in our household. So my husband is a real one. Sorry for anybody who knows my husband, and sorry to my husband. He always gets the flack on these things. He's a real one for standing while I'm cooking in the kitchen, okay, on his phone, and it drives me wild. And so I'm like, stop doing that now. Put your phone down and either go and do something with the children or give me a hand. Okay, he does also cook, by the way, so I'm gonna let him off there. So, but he gets sucked in to things on his phone. And so I have to be really purposeful about helping him to come off it. But we have an agreement in our household that that's what we will do, that we will remind each other. And my children will remind me and say, Mummy, come off your phone. You're on it too much today. And that's really helpful for me, although of course it creates great shame in me. And then I have to repair that and say, I'm so sorry, I'm going to put my phone down. Okay, and do my understanding about why I've been on it for however long it's been. Okay. So there are also some resources out there. The Family Resource Centre is particularly fantastic at dealing with this issue. They have training courses as well as written resources. So please go onto their website and have a look at that. And they do workshops on managing screen time and parenting. And they have a teen safety and child safety training. And there are full lesson plans on digital safety. There's also, you'll see a link there on mbfpreventioneducation.org, and that's really helpful in terms of safety online for children and thinking about screen time and phone use. So just if you go back 2 slides, Renee, for me, I don't know if they'll be available after, Juliana. Will the slides be available after, Renee? Will this be posted online?
Well, the recording will be posted online, not the slides by themselves.
The recording will be posted, Juliana, and you'll be able to see that on YouTube. Brilliant. So in the 19,
Sorry,
Julie,
sorry,
go
could I
ahead.
just ask something there? Very practical question. I can't actually see any of the slides. So all I
Oh,
can see is people's names and then the profile. And I've clicked all the buttons and I can't see any. So would it be possible to send me them separately if they're not going to be online? Would that be okay?
We can only send the recorded presentation, but
possible.
yeah,
Well,
I'm
no, the
wondering to,
slides I'd quite like to see because I'm not seeing any of them. So I don't know what to click on to. I've tried clicking on everything,
okay.
Okay.
but
Julie,
I'm
I'll
not.
contact you about it after,
Yeah,
okay?
okay, that's fine. No problems.
Brilliant.
Is
So,
that, can other people see the slides too? I'm just
Yes,
curious.
you can see the
Yes.
Okay,
slides.
Yes.
okay.
brilliant. So, in the I'm going to get this wrong. I want to say 50s. There was a very famous experiment called the still face experiment, which looked at attachment between parents and children. And what they did was they got a parent to interact with their child, and then they got them to look at them with a very blank face with no expression at all for around about a minute to a minute and a half. And they saw the distress created in their child. And so we use that experiment in order to show parents when we're doing attachment training what it does to a child when we don't respond with affect. Okay, and like smiling and laughing. So the problem with phones is that when we're looking at our phone, here's my phone here, okay, and we're down here, our children might be talking to us and we are looking like this. Just a minute. Yep, just a minute. Okay, we have a still face. And that is really distressing to very young children who don't have the ability of language and don't really understand what we're doing. And so it's creating problems with attachment. Um, the other issue is that instead of people using alcohol to self-regulate, which is not a good idea, by the way, to emotionally regulate with alcohol or drugs, we are numbing ourselves with social media and doom scrolling. It kind of shuts down our brain for a bit, which can feel very soothing in the moment, but actually creates more anxiety afterwards. So instead of working on learning emotional regulation techniques, what we're doing is using our phones to numb and bring ourselves under our window of tolerance. So actually we can't then re-engage with the real world afterwards. Okay. So it's really important to understand the the role that our phone is taking in our lives and how we are using it. Okay, because we're each using it at different times for different things, depending on what we've been through in life or in our day. And if we have a particular trauma background, we're much more likely to use our phones to numb, and really, really unhealthy for our brains. Okay, because we're teaching it to avoid and tap out rather than trying to process our trauma and engage in the world. Okay, we can move on, Renee. So, right, I'm going to be careful about this because I've got this WhatsApp group that I'm in charge of, and I'm horrendous at managing it because I don't have time. And then people, whoever posts spam on it about stock markets, and it drives people mad. Okay, so I'm going to try and sort it out at some point, but please join if you feel able to with this QR code. Um, Knowing that I'm going to try and do something about effectively using this in the relatively near future. Okay, Renee, you can hold me to that. Okay. So on that note, if anybody sat around twiddling their thumbs and particularly wants to help me with that WhatsApp group and manage it, I would really love your help. Okay, or if you know somebody else who's passionate about this who isn't here today, please send them my way because I would love their help to try and manage this because I'm very passionate about it, as I'm sure you can probably tell, but I just don't have the time to do this along with everything else in any kind of effective way. And again, just makes me feel shame because it's another thing I'm failing at royally. And that's kind of life, isn't it, for us, especially as women? Oh, thanks, Juliana. Okay, I will reach out to you. Thank you. Okay, fabulous. Maybe we should meet for a coffee and talk about how we can manage it. Thank you. Okay, awesome. I'll be in touch. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening to me witter on again about something that I care about and for inputting into that conversation. I really hope that it has been in some way helpful. Any questions? Because we have got 10 minutes left. Or comments?
Before anyone says any questions, I just want to let you all know that I'm going to be putting a feedback survey link into the chat for you to complete on this lunch and learn. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you all can talk, but I'm going to be sharing that link in the chat. Okay. I'm also going to be sharing a link or a book recommendation that talks about this generation too that you talked about, Chantal, regarding the fresh generation to fully be into that social media era. So I'll put the description for that book in there.
Brilliant. Okay. So, yes, Martika, you said the blank face experiment stood out to you in one of your psychology classes you took when your oldest son was a toddler. It is really stark, isn't it, when you watch that? Um, and you know, when we think about then doing that when we're using our phones, inadvertently we're doing that, it's really quite worrying. And Juliana, yes, you say you remember me saying limit screen time to an hour, even into adolescence. So actually, when we're looking at kind of 14, 15-year-olds, the guidance is less than 2 hours per day. Anything kind of up to the age of 13, 14 really should be an hour or less. And it seems like there is a difference between watching like a full length movie, for example, to using short burst videos on YouTube or screens, and you will likely see that in your children's behaviors. So really what we're talking about when we're trying to limit to an hour, it's using small screens to scroll through videos or watch short fire, very loud videos. Okay. And then Anna, you said, will there be a recording? Yes, there will be a recording of this and it will be posted onto YouTube. The survey is in the chat, so please complete that. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining this lunch and learn topic. Again, I really hope that it's been helpful. Is there anybody who wants to add to the conversation or make any comments or have any questions?
No, other than to say thank you very much, Chantal, for another, really interesting presentation. I mean, this is something that I particularly struggle with quite a lot in with the young people that I'm working with and adults, because this is the one rare opportunity where I've got age on my side, because I wasn't really brought up with it and what have you. So I only use my phone quite occasionally. So I probably don't, suffer as much personally. But it's very frustrating and quite distressing to see how dominant it's become. Just walking across, a schoolyard instead of seeing young people at high school chatting in groups and sitting around and what have you, they're all sat separately, just on a
Yeah,
phone.
that's
It's
right.
really, really very worrying. So thank you so much for that input. I'm so sorry I have to go now because I have a client, but I'll contact you later about, I don't know why I couldn't see any of the slides.
Sorry, Julie.
No problem at all. Okay, probably a problem on my end.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. And thank you, everybody. That it's very difficult, this topic, and there aren't rights and wrongs here, and we're all trying to feel our way in an arena that is extraordinarily challenging. So, what we can do is the best that we can do in this moment. And let's just keep trying to do it together. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.